Archaeologists discovered a unique mask in South America, and 500 years ago, our ancestors strung the human vertebrae of their relatives on sticks. In China, they dug up a statue of a dragon with a tiger's head, and the legendary Rama had a bow and arrows with rockets. What else hides the ancient vault? You will learn in this video. Hi friend, you're on the KirTop channel. 500-year-old bones on sticks. Hundreds of years ago, the indigenous inhabitants of the coastal territories of modern Peru collected the remains of their dead from defiled graves and put them on sticks. Scientists have counted almost 200 of these sticks in stone tombs in the territory of Chincha Culture Valley. Archaeologists suggest that the Spaniards who plundered these graves are to blame for the appearance of such a practice. In an attempt to somehow restore integrity to the remains of their ancestors, the indigenous people strung them on such sticks. In total, archaeologists have studied 664 graves in 42 cemeteries spread over an area of 40 square kilometers of the Chincha Valley. They found 193 sticks with vertebrae. It was possible to determine their age by radioactive carbon in the bones and wood. Radioactive carbon accumulates in the body during life, and after life, it decomposes into nitrogen at a known rate. By the amount of radioactive carbon left, you can find out when the organism died. The analysis showed that the vertebrae and sticks died in 1450–1650 AD, during the collapse of the Inca Empire and the seizure of power by European colonialists. Most of these restored burials were found by scientists in large stone tombs called chalpa. In such tombs, several people were almost always buried. In one, scientists counted the remains of hundreds of people. At its peak, in 1400, the Chincha Kingdom had a population of about 30,000 people. At the end of the 15th century, they merged with the Inca Empire. After the arrival of Europeans, famine, and epidemics, the population was greatly reduced. In 1583, only 979 houses remained. It is known from European documents that the Spaniards often devastated Chincha tombs, collecting gold and artifacts and destroying the remains. Statue of a dragon with a tiger head. Chinese archaeologists, during excavations in the legendary ruins of Changshidu in Sichuan province in southwestern China, discovered a unique bronze statue of the divine beast, a dragon with a tiger head and dragon horns. The forelimbs of the bronze statues on a triangular copper bracket, and the back part goes up. The archaeologists found the statue in December 2021, but they decided to talk about the find on the eve of the Chinese New Year, which according to Eastern calendar is the year of the tiger. It is reported that the body of the bronze deity has not yet been fully excavated. Due to lack of time and heavy work tasks, the experts decided to conduct a second full excavation of this artifact in March 2022. It is already known that the artifact dates back to the Shang dynasty, which existed in China from the 16th to the 11th centuries BC. According to scientists, the bronze statue of a half-dragon, half-tiger most likely was either a religious object used in rituals or was a symbol or totem of some famous and influential clan. However, more details will be available only after the excavations are completed and the sculpture is studied in the laboratory. Mysterious woman 300 years older than Ötzi. Austrian scientists re-examined the remains of an individual discovered in 1909 near Graz and found that they belonged to an elderly woman who died at the age of more than 50 years around 3630–3380 BC. These are the oldest human remains found in Styria, which are about 300 years older than Ötzi found nearby. Examination of her bones showed that during her life, she often starved, and after her death, it seemed that her head was cut off. In the era of the late Neolithic and Eneolithic, that is around 4900–3400 BC in Central Europe on the territory of modern Hungary, Slovakia, the Czech Republic, Austria, Slovenia, and Poland, the Lengyel archaeological culture was formed, which is named after the burial ground of the same name, excavated at the end of the 19th century. This time stands out primarily due to the development of copper processing, which among the barriers of the Lengyel culture is mainly represented by finds of jewelry. These people, who were mainly engaged in agriculture, preferred to settle in large fortified settlements, with which their burial grounds are also associated. Burial burials were performed mainly according to the rite of inhumation, in a crouched position on the side, and men were often buried without skulls. Scientists noted that it was a fairly strong woman of small stature who died at an advanced age, about 53 years old. An examination of the bones showed that the woman had well-developed muscles, apparently as a result of carrying heavy loads over long distances. The remains also show evidence of multiple periods of malnutrition, resulting in a high susceptibility to disease. Apparently, her short stature, about 147.1 centimeters, was also the result of nutritional deficiencies. Researchers found signs of manipulation in her skull, so the woman's occipital foramen was expanded with the help of incisions, and the condyles were also removed. In addition, traces of interference are visible on her fist and second cervical vertebrae. Scientists believe that shortly after her death, her skull was separated from the cervical vertebrae with a flint knife. The reasons for this behavior, according to the researchers, are difficult to judge. Perhaps this is part of the funeral rite, the desire to extract the brain or receive a trophy. Fragments of gold embroidery in the Arctic. Human scientists during excavations in the Arctic found fragments of gold embroidery of the 17th century, which is the first such find in Russia. Early examples of such gold embroidery and man's artwork were known only from engravings. Things were preserved due to the climate of the Arctic. After studying the find, the scientists came to the conclusion that the gold threads consist of a silk core folded from 200-300 silk threads and twisted with strips of foil. The threads are made in Western Europe, but the clothes themselves were made by Russian craftswomen. The finds have survived to this day due to the conditions of the Arctic zone, permafrost, and special soil processes. The cell caps probably got closed with gold embroidery as payment for the royal service. There are no such finds in any museum in Russia. The remains of gold embroidery are planned to be exhibited in the Museum of Salekhard. Remains of royal clothes in Israel. Researchers from Israel conducting excavations in the Timna Valley discovered the remains of a woven fabric, a brush, and wool fibers dyed in the so-called royal purple. The shade of the fabric matched the biblical descriptions of the purple robes worn by King Solomon and other ancient rulers. According to scientists, they got the opportunity to look into the wardrobe of biblical kings. Purple dye had a bright color and durability, but it was extremely difficult to obtain. Therefore, it was distinguished by a very high cost and was available only to the elite. Radiocarbon dating has confirmed that the finds date back to around 1000 BC, which corresponds to the time of the biblical kingdoms of David and Solomon in Jerusalem. At that time, purple was made from shellfish living in the Mediterranean Sea. According to historians, it costs even more than gold. Scientists noted that this is the first time that Iron Age purple cloth has been discovered in Israel and in general in the entire southern Levant. Previously, only clamshell scraps and potsherds with stains of paint which testified to the purple industry could be found. The fabric has been preserved in the valley due to its extremely dry climate. The mystery of the Luristan bronze figurines. In the late 1920s, the antiquities market was flooded with exquisite bronze figurines. These were images of people and animals, embossed bronze goblets, and elegant pins. They delighted connoisseurs of antiquity, but little was known about the origin of these figurines. Merchants indicated only the region in the mountains, Luristan. At the same time, no information about civilization, time, or exact place of their origin was reported. The figurines began to spread in 1928, when in the town of Harsin, about 30 kilometers east of Hermannsha, a local farmer discovered them in his fields. The rumor about them quickly spread, both among scientists and local residents, who quickly set about excavating. At the same time, flows of merchants went to the city, who bought works of art and resold them to museums and collectors. The first Western archaeologist to investigate bronze figurines was the German-born scientist Erich Schmidt, who thus began to explore Luristan in 1935. On the advice of his wife, Mary Helen, he decided to use the plane to survey the area. Thus, Luristan and other Iranian cities, including Persepolis, were previously studied from above. Aerial photography proved to be valuable not only for the study of places, but also for archaeology in general. Subsequently, it became widely used by archaeologists around the world and is used to this day. True, in addition to aerial photography, scientists have also recently used laser mapping. Despite numerous unauthorized excavations that began in the late 1920s, Eric Schmidt's team managed to find a large number of bronze, ivory, and ceramic items. All items were similar to those found earlier. Much of the research work at Sarkdam was centered around the multi-chamber structure, which was believed to be a temple or place of worship. In addition, archaeologists have also found many items in the tombs. The civilization that created these products is still a mystery. Candidates include the early Medes, an Indo-European group that lived in the area. Other scholars are inclined to believe that the figurines were created by the Sumerians, a nomadic people who originated in southern Russia and may have moved to Luristan in the 8th century BC. Cuneiform inscriptions on swords found in the region suggest that the items were made by the Kassites, a people who settled in Luristan around the 16th century BC. Until the beginning of the 12th century BC, they occupied central and southern Mesopotamia. As for the figurines themselves, many of them depicted men and women. Many animal figurines have also been found, ranging from big cats or birds of prey to mythological beasts such as griffins and sphinxes. This motif is characteristic of many ancient civilizations. It is believed that it symbolizes the dominance of man over nature. Millennium Time Capsule. I want to show you an ancient underwater place that you have hardly heard of. This place is called Cheyenne Cave, which is probably the largest underwater quarry on the planet. Inside the cave, there are traces of machines and other facts indicating that it was created by an unknown civilization. And since it is flooded inside with water, it managed to avoid natural weathering. Thus, this cave is a time capsule with clean water. The cave is located in China, not far from the South Sea. In fact, this mountain is not a mountain at all, but an extinct volcano over 80 million years old. The entrance to the cave is quite modest, but once you go inside, you will see a hole that can accommodate 1,000 people. At the other end of the hole, artificial caves flooded with water begin. By the way, the mountain is located at an altitude of 100 meters above sea level, and all this is inside an extinct volcano. Only in 2009, a group of divers decided to find out. Their research showed that the cave has an area of at least 60,000 square meters. Underwater, they found countless steps leading to the lower holes. Following the steps, the divers discovered stacked stone slabs that were apparently the remains of an ancient working. Their appearance resembles the appearance of pavement slabs in ancient China. The divers were able to map the cave. The divers also found various bowls, lampstands, and bamboo ladders. The walls of the caves are covered with silt. However, under it, divers were able to find traces of tools. Similar marks can be seen in the Yangshan quarry and the Baalbeke. By the way, scientists still do not know how these marks are made. It is possible to make them with hand tools. Since the cave was rediscovered not so long ago, you can be sure that these traces appeared there millennia ago. Researchers suggest that the ancient Chinese discovered these caves 1,000 years ago and used them as a quarry. At the same time, they did not work at the maximum depth. This is evidenced by the finds found like lamps and tools, and it would be extremely difficult to transport finished thin slabs. Roughly built cobblestone stairs also speak of this. At the same time, traces of complex ununified tools can be found everywhere on the walls. This suggests that completely different types of labor force worked in these mines. This suggests that this structure is a megalithic structure created by an unknown civilization that dominated the Earth thousands of years ago. Rama's bow and rockets. Rama is the protagonist of the ancient epic Ramayana, who is always depicted with a bow and arrow. The legends say that he never missed and his arrows could pass through several targets at the same time. For example, in this image, his arrow is going through 7 trees. Usually, ancient sculptors depicted people with primitive bows, but the bow of Rama and his troops always had unusual details. This is how archers are depicted on the walls of the Chenakasava temple. Archers march alongside regular foot soldiers in regular clothes, and their bows have wheels. The amazing thing is that modern bows use the same rollers that, according to Wikipedia, were invented about 50 years ago. But the walls of the temple make it clear that the ancients used this technology thousands of years ago. Of course, some expert will come and say that this is just decoration, flowers, but why do soldiers need to decorate their weapons? Did Rama only need rollers on his bow to punch through 7 trees? Now let's look at their arrows. Everyone knows that the arrow should be thin and long, but the arrows that we see in these images are more like rockets. The arrowhead looks like there's something inside it and doesn't look like a simple pointed tip at all. Remember the Rambo movie? There is a guy on YouTube who proved that attaching explosives to an arrow is a piece of cake. The fact that these are rocket arrows and not just arrows is also said by the legends about Rama. They say that the area where the arrow hit was destroyed and his enemies exploded, leaving only soot behind. It is impossible to know for sure whether Rama and his soldiers had such advanced technology. However, we can judge the ancient people by carvings, and we can say with confidence that they were incredible builders, even surpassing modern ones. And based on this fact, we can conclude that the weapons of ancient people could be much more complicated than historians tell us. Ancient mask of a strange substance. More recently, the sensational news spread around the world that mysterious artifacts were discovered off the coast of Florida. Their antiquity was obvious, but their origin was unknown. In total, 7 items fell into the hands of scientists. All of them are created from a material that is practically not found on Earth, iridium. Of course, this item was created by the hands of people and in quite earthly conditions. The fact is that iridium is found in large quantities in fallen meteorites. Apparently, the ancient people noticed the sign from heaven and went after it. Having obtained the most precious stone, they began to create cult objects. Analysis of the artifacts showed that they are at least 12,000 years old. Considering that iridium is a very refractory and hard material, it is probably worth reconsidering the level of development of metallurgy among the ancient Incas. Presumably, these items belong to them. Personally, I have no doubt that the ancient civilization possessed transcendental knowledge in those areas that have not yet been conquered by modern humanity. Therefore, there is no doubt that the masters were able to create these masterpieces 12,000 years ago. Of greatest interest was the mask of the god Viracocha. Its thickness is only 1.7 millimeters. At the same time, there is a drawing of a great deity and various religious symbols on it. This artifact allows us to conclude that the culture of the late Incas is extremely scarce when compared with objects that are thousands of years old. The image of the god Viracocha allows you to accurately determine the origin of the product. It was created by the Incas 12,000 years ago. However, modern history indicates that the Inca Empire is one of the youngest civilizations. It turns out that historians deliberately hide the truth about the ancient Incas or know very little about them, their true culture. Does it remind you of anything? The Anglo-Saxons destroyed the great history of the Indians, so that there was a feeling that America was built not on the death of Indian civilizations, but on the territories occupied by uneducated nomadic tribes. Slavic knowledge was subjected to a similar purge. History cannot be trusted. Thank God, artifacts help to find out the forgotten truth. Rate the video with your thumbs up or down and tell your friends about the video, and I will try to respond to every kind comment. Thanks for your views. Bye everyone!